Hey everybody, what's happening? If things are as they appear to me, it looks like my video is frozen in a rather unflattering pose at that, but it looks like the video is frozen, but I'm guessing that you're getting audio. I'm going to go ahead and remove myself from the stream for a minute and start that over again. So let's see what happens. We're going to go ahead and try and stop the camera. Okay, so now I should be back in the stream. I'm hoping I'm back in the stream. Again, camera freeze. It's weird and unpleasant, and I really wish right now that I had a different producer, somebody who wasn't me running this thing. How's everybody doing tonight? Give me some comments. Let me see who we've got here. I see Angel Monique says the purple is back. I see Kitty Foxy says, "Hey y'all, good to see you both." Um, I see Judy Lee is here. I see Mimi Brown asking, "What it do, folk? What in fact do it do, folk?" Like I have it right here, but its function escapes me. What it do? What what it do? I don't know what to do with it. Judy Lee says the video is laggy but not totally frozen, so that's good. I see Akanke is here. Akanke Tyra Washington, and Angel says the things are good now, so that's good. Um, all right, it's 9:48. We Akanke say it do all the things. Oh my. I, I wasn't ready, and I don't even know if it was meant the way that I very clearly took it, but it do, for those of you who don't know, it do all the things. So Angel Monique says it do what it do, and that's all it does. All right, now y'all too grown for me. Y'all entirely too grown for me. I see L Jack in the building. I see Erica Yolita as she started off on the Book of Faces, but now we see Erica Goodman has moved over to YouTube. So before we get started in earnest tonight, let me do like a couple of little bits of housekeeping. So as you know, we broadcast on Facebook, we broadcast on YouTube, we broadcast now live on Twitch. From time to time, I will also do this on Clubhouse, time permitting. Clubhouse troubles me, to be not to put too fine a point on it. I don't really enjoy starting up I like that I have a unified system where I can integrate all of my streams, and Clubhouse is an outlier to that, which means that I have to do extra work. So I'm working on finding a way to streamline it. So for those of you all who really listen but don't watch, Clubhouse would probably be the ideal way for me to do that. If you want to find me on Clubhouse, you can. It's the same at that I am on Instagram, and the same at that I am on the Twitters. It's at Storytime Julian. You can find me there and follow me there. I'm not using it as much as I should, but I will be doing it more in the future. So I look forward to meeting you and seeing you. We are going to try and do more live reading events there because why not? I mean, it's a stripped down version, but why not? Why not make it do what it do and it do all the things? So we are here today after a really uh, tumultuous day yesterday. I think it's a day that affected Black folk far differently than it did the rest of the nation, in large part because that wasn't our monkey and that wasn't our circus. For the most part, there was a bit of detachment, I think, for a lot of us because we saw the machine doing what we knew the machine was built to do. There was no surprise. There was no, this is not America. Of course, this is America, and I think we all knew that. But I think what occurred for us a little bit differently is that we were able to see everyone see for the first time for some people who, don't have eyes or had scales on them willfully. We saw everyone see what we've always known, which is black folk are treated incalculably different than white folk are. And it took, we've been saying this since those Duck Dynasty motherfuckers took over that empty federal building in Oregon, and we were like, they just occupied a federal building with guns and they are holding it hostage. That's terrorism. Call them terrorists, and they absolutely refused to call them that. And all of that, all those excuses that were made about how they were just expressing their rights of free speech. And I'm like, why does their speech involve a gun? We saw this, we've seen this. This was nothing new, but for the rest of the country to see it writ large and to see the police not even looking, like they didn't even look like the police that show up for us. They didn't even look like the police that show up for us. I made a post on Facebook where I said I saw a bunch of Beckys in khakis, and I was not exaggerating. If you have your ponytail poking out the back of your fitted, or not fitted, but the back of your snap cap, and it's swinging and swaying in the breeze as you march with your very thin level one, not even real tactical gear Kevlar on your way to quell an insurrection, while indeed wearing khakis, like, you don't occur for me as a force to be reckoned with. Not when what I'm used to seeing is men in fatigues with multiple layers of bulletproof armor and large shields and huge batons and uh, guns that look like military style weapons, supposedly firing non lethal rubber bullets, except for the people who have been killed by the wounds caused by these rubber bullets. So the force that showed up to stop this wasn't even the same as what we deal with. Now, we knew this, but the rest of the country didn't seem to. And so we got to see them once again figure it out. They'll forget. They already have. Um, there is no movement to unseat the tyrant who started and indeed facilitated all of this. There's still the hand wringing and questioning of how could this happen in America, because this is America doing what it does. This is ultimately the end of the programming. Like, this is when you programmed the machine, this was going to be the end. You just didn't think that part through. Anyway, that happened yesterday and we made our dinners. I I actually fried some chicken yesterday because I hadn't fried any in a while. It was good. My mom enjoyed it. Had some greens and what did I make to go with it? Some slaw. I didn't make the slaw. My mom likes slaw. I don't know why. I don't understand slaw. But that's neither here nor there. We're here today, and today we are going to be celebrating the birth and the work of Zora Neale Hurston, one of the giants of Black literature, one of the giants of literature, period. Um, Certainly one of the most important voices in folk literature. Um, an artist with an incredible sensitivity to the rhythms and the poetry and the musicality of the language and the dialect from folk from the bottom, from in the lower parts, the low country, the parts of Florida and the lower parts of Georgia and all around about in that area where there's such a wealth of very rich language and dialect. And she, when it came to that, had a blessed pen. Now, Zora Neale Hurston was very much at home, very much in her element when writing in those areas. But make no mistake, she was also a tremendous researcher. She did not just write these. She did not just write these things out of whole cloth. She didn't just dream them up. She researched considerably, um, and it makes for a wealth of phenomenal stories. Today, we are going to be reading two short stories of hers, and Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we're going to read a story, maybe two, from her friend and a one-time collaborator, Langston Hughes. The Simple stories. Now, the character Simple also spoke in a dialect, but it was not as rich as the way that it is good to see Ms. Bernice L. McFadden in the house. I also see a good friend of the show and a good friend of mine personally, Keo Burrell. Good to see you. Just noticing some of the new folks who joined in. I see Joker is here. I also see Lisa Bobbitt. Um, Good to see everybody here. But now going back to what I was saying now, Langston did not write his dialect with the same blessed pen because he didn't live it. Langston was a northern boy. He was a Yankee. He was from up north. Now, when they collaborated on the play Mulebone, they had a chance meeting. I think it was in Alabama at a diner, and he was traveling to do some research, and she was traveling to do some research, ultimately for what would become, I believe, Barracoon. And they got to talking and realized the similarities and the love that they have for the same things. And so they were traveling together because Langston was very much out of his element. And and Ms. Zora Neale Hurston was very much in her element. And so um that was the beginning of that. Now the stories go on about how that friendship ultimately fell apart, and it had to do with it's really salacious. The way the rumors have it that there was a love interest, a love triangle that involved um, a typist or the transcriber of some of their work, and that there was a problem with some proposed or supposed poaching of a patron, and just lots of things there. I see that Lisa Bobbitt is reminding us that Amistad Books is giving away free audio book of Their Eyes Were Watching God, and wants to know if it's okay to drop the link. I am never going to deny the people a book, so please, by all means, go ahead and drop that link in, and then I'm going to ask that one of our moderators go ahead and collect that and make sure that we post it on the page as well. At the end of tonight's show, we are going to post links to the two stories that will be read tonight because they are available online. And if you want to read them yourself, I highly encourage you to do so. I cannot imagine that anybody here tonight is unfamiliar with Zora Neale Hurston or her work. But if you are not familiar, I think you're in for a treat. The two stories that we're going to be doing tonight are John Redding Goes to Sea and the Gilded Six Bits. So let me go ahead and we're going to go ahead and toss up the banner for that. And we're going to go ahead and get started because we are officially at time. I'm really, really glad to have you with me here tonight. We're going to do a break in between the stories and and kind of do a little bit of discussion. I want to hear your thoughts. So please, over there in the sidebar in the comments, whatever platform you're watching us on, please make sure to comment. Let us know what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, and we'll have a little bit of something to discuss in the midpoint. All right. But beginning now, let me go ahead and treat the palate. This is sparkling water, y'all. I'm not drinking soda. And we're going to begin with John Redding Goes to Sea by Zora Neale Hurston. The villagers said that John Redding was a queer child. His mother thought he was too. She would shake her head sadly and observe to John's father, "Alf, it's too bad our boy's got a spell on him." The father always met this lament with indifference, if not impatience. "Oh, woman, stop that talk about conjure. Tain't so nohow. I don't want John to get that foolishness in him." "'Cause you allus try to tell no more'n me, but I ain't so ignorant. I knows a heap myself. Many and many's the people been drove out of their senses by conjuration, or writ to death by witches. I keep on telling you, woman, tain't so. Believe it all you wants to, but don't you tell my son none of it." Perhaps 10-year-old John was puzzling to the simple folk there in the Florida woods, for he was an imaginative child and fond of daydreams. The St. the John's the St. John River flowed a scarce 300 feet from his back door. On its banks at this point grew numerous palms, luxuriant magnolias, and bay trees with a dense undergrowth of ferns, cattails, and rope grass. On the bosom of the stream float millions of delicately colored hyacinths. The little brown boy loved to wander down to the water's edge and, casting in dry twigs, watch them sail away downstream to Jacksonville, the sea, the wide world, and John Redding wanted to follow them. Sometimes in his dreams he was a prince, riding away in a gorgeous carriage. Often he was a knight, bestride a fiery charger prancing down the white shell road that led to distant lands. At other times he was a steamboat captain, piloting his craft down the St. John River to where the sky seemed to touch the water. No matter what he dreamed or who he fancied himself to be, he always ended by riding away to the horizon, for in his childish ignorance, he thought that to be the furthest land. But these twigs, which John called ships, did not always sail away. Sometimes they would be swept in among the weeds, growing in the shallow water, and be held there. One day his father came upon him, scolding the weeds for stopping his sea-going vessels. "Let go my ships, you mean old weeds, you!" John screamed and stamped impotently. "They wants to go away. You let 'em go on." Alfred laid his hand on his son's head lovingly. "What's the matter, son?" "My ships, Pa," the child answered, weeping. "I throwed 'em off to go in way off, and them old weeds won't let 'em." Well, don't cry. I thought I thought you was a grown-up man. Men don't cry like babies. You mustn't take too hard about your ships. You got to get used to things getting tied up. There's lots of folks that go on off to do something and didn't catch them and go on off to F some. Hold on a minute. Well, don't cry. I thought you was a grown-up man. Men don't cry like babies. You mustn't take it too hard about your ships. You got to get used to things getting tied up. There's lots of folks that go on off to do something, didn't catch them and hold them. Alfred Redding Brown's face grew wistful for a moment, and the child, noticing it, asked quickly, "Do weeds tangle up folks too, Pa?" "Now, no, child. Don't be taking too much stock of what I say. I talks in parables sometimes. Come on, let's go on to supper." Alf took his son's hand and slowly started toward the house. Soon, John broke the silence. "Pa, when I gets as big as you, I'm going farther than them ships. I'm going to where the sky touches the ground." "Well, son, when I was a boy, I said I was going too, but here I am. I hopes you have better luck than me." "Pa, I bet you I seen something in the wood lot you ain't seen." "What?" "See that tallest pine tree over there? How it looks like a skull with the crown on?"
"Yes, indeed," said the father, looking toward the tree designated. "It do look like a skull since you called my attention to it. You imagine lots of things nobody else ever did see, son."
"Sometimes, Pa, that old tree waves at me just after the sun goes down. It makes me sad and scared, too."
"I expect you scared of the dark, that's all, sonny. When you gets bigger, you won't think of such."
Hand in hand, the two trudged across the plowed land and up to the house, the child dreaming of days when he should wander to far countries, and the man of the days when he might have. And thus they entered the kitchen. Mattie Redding, John's mother, was setting the table for supper. She was a small, wiry woman with large eyes that might have been beautiful when she was young, but too much weeping had left them watery and weak.
"Matty,"
Alf began as he took his place at the table.
"don't you know our boy is different from any other child around here? He 'lows he's going to sea when he gets grown, and I reckon I'll let him."
The woman turned from the stove, skillet in hand. "Alf, you ain't gone crazy, is you? John can't keep wanting to stray off, 'cause he got a spell on him. But you ought to be ashamed to be encouraging him."
"Ain't I done told you 40 times not to talk like that low-life mess in front of my boy?"
"Well, if there ain't no conjure in the world, how come Mitch Potts been laying on his back 6 months? The doctor can't do him no good. Answer me that."
The very night John was born, Granny seed old witch Judy Davis creeping out of this yard. You know she swore to fix me for marrying you. Way from daughter Edna. She put travel dust down for my child. That's what she done, to make him walk away from me. And ever since he been able to crawl, he been trying to go. Maddie, a man don't need no travel dust to make him want to hit the road. It just come natural for a man to travel. They all wants to go sometime or another, but they can't all get away. I wants my John to go and I wants my John to go and see, cause I wanted to go myself. When he comes back, I can see them furrin places with his eyes. He can't help wanting to he can't help wanting to go, cause he a man child. Mrs. Redding promptly went off into a fit of weeping, but the man and boy ate supper unmoved. 12 years of married life had taught Alfred that far from being miserable when she wept, his wife was enjoying a bit of self-pity. Thus John Redding grew to manhood, playing, studying, and dreaming. He attended the village school, as did most of the youth about him, but he also went to high school at the country seat where none of the villagers went. His father shared his dreams and ambitions, but his mother could not understand why she should wish to go to strange places where neither she nor his father had been. None of their community had ever been farther away from than Jacksonville. Few indeed had ever even been there. Their own gardens, general store, and occasional trips to the county seat, 7 miles away, sufficed for all their needs. Life was simple indeed with these folk. John was the subject of much discussion amongst the country folk. Why didn't he teach school instead of thinking about strange places and people? Did he think himself better than any other gals that he would not go to courting any of them? He must not be fixed as his mother claimed. Else, where did his queer notions come from? Well, he was always queer, and one could not expect the man to be different from the child. They never failed to stop work at the approach of Alfred in order to be at the fence and inquire after John's health and ask when he expected to leave. Oh, Alfred would answer, just as soon as his ma gets reconciled to the notion. He's a mighty dutiful boy, my John is. He don't want to hurt her feelings. The boy had on several occasions attempted to reconcile his mother to the notion, but found it a difficult task. Maddie always took refuge in self-pity and tears. Her son's desire were incomprehensible to her, that was all. She did not want to hurt him. It was love, mother love, that made her cling so desperately to John. Lord knows, she would sigh, I never was happy and never expects to be. And from your actions, put in Alfred hotly, you's determined not to be. That's right, Alfred. Go on and abuse me. You allus does. I knows I'm ignorant and all that, but this my son. I bred him and born him. He can't help from wanting to go roving 'cause travel dust been put down for him. But maybe we can cure him by discouraging the idea. Well, I wants my son to go, and he wants to go too. He's a man now, Matty, and we must let John hoe his own row. If his traveling 'twon't be for long, he'll come back to us better than when he went off. What you say, son? Mama, John began slowly. It hurts me to see you so troubled over my going away, but I feel I must go. I'm stagnating here. This indolent atmosphere will stifle every bit of ambition that's in me. Let me go, Mama, please. What is there here for me? Why, sometimes I get to feeling just like a lump of dirt turned over by the plow. Just where it falls, that's where it lies. No thought of movement or nothing. I want to make myself something, not just stay where I was born. Now, John, it's better for you to stay here and take over the school. Why don't you marry and settle down? I don't want to, Mama. I want to go away. Well, said Miss Redding, pursing her mouth tightly, you ain't going with my consent. I'm sorry, Mama, that you won't consent. I'm going nevertheless. John, my baby, you wouldn't kill your poor old mama, would you? Come kiss me, son. The boy flung his arms about his mother and held her closely while she sobbed on his breast. To all of her pleas, however, he answered that he must go. I'll stay at home this year, Mama. Then I'll go for a while, but it won't be long. I'll come back and make you and Papa oh so happy. Do you agree, Mama dear? I reckon 'tain't nothing tall for me to do else. Things went on very well around the Redding home for some time. During the day, John helped his father about the farm and read a great deal at night. Then the unexpected happened. John married Stella Canty, a neighbor's daughter. The courtship was brief but ardent, on John's part at least. He danced with Stella at a candy pulling, walked her home, and in 3 weeks had declared himself. Mrs. Redding declared that she was happier than she had ever been in her life. She therefore indulged in a whole afternoon of weeping. John's change was occasioned possibly by the fact that Stella was really beautiful. He was young and red-blooded, and the time was spring. Springtime in Florida is not a matter of peeping violets or bursting buds merely. It is a riot of color and nature. Glistening green leaves, pink, blue, purple, yellow blossoms that fairly stagger the visitors from the north. The miles of hyacinth lie like an undulating carpet on the surface of the river and divide reluctantly when the slow-moving alligators push their way log-like across. The nights are white nights, for the moon shines with dazzling splendor, or in the absence of that goddess, the soft darkness creeps down, laden with innumerable scents. The heavy, the heavy fragrance of magnolias mingled with the delicate sweetness of jasmine and wild roses. If time and propinquity conquered John, what then? These forces have overcome older men. The raptures of the first few weeks over, John began to saunter out the gate to gaze wistfully down the white, dusty road, or to wander again to the river, as he had done in his childhood. To be sure, he did not send forth twig ships any longer, but his thoughts would, in spite of himself, stray down river to Jacksonville, the sea, the wide world, and poor home-tied John Redding wanted to follow them. He grew silent and pensive. Maddie accounted for this by her ever-ready explanation of conjuration. Alfred said nothing but smoked and puttered about the barn more than ever. Stella accused her husband of indifference and made his life miserable with tears, accusations, and pouting. At last, John decided to bring matters to a head and broached the subject to his wife. Stella, dear, I want to go roving about the world for a spell. Would you stay here with Papa and Mama and wait for me to come back? John, is you crazy, sure enough? If you don't want me, say so, and I can go home to my folk. Stella, darling, I do want you, but I want to go away too. I can have both if you'll let me. We'll be so happy when I return. No, John, you can't rush off to one side. You can't rush me off side like that. You didn't have to marry me. There's plenty of others that would have been glad enough to get me. You know I want an educated before. You know I wasn't educated beforehand. Don't make me too conscious of my weakness, Stella. I know I should never have married with my inclinations, but it's done now. No use to talk about what is past. I love you and want to keep you, but I can't stifle that longing for the open road, rolling seas, for peoples and countries that I've never seen. I'm suffering too, Stella. I'm paying for my rashness in marrying before I was ready. I'm not trying to shirk my duty. You'll be well taken care of in the meanwhile. John, folks all have said you's queer and told me not to marry you, but I just loved you so. I couldn't help it, and now, to think you wants to sneak off and leave me. But I'm coming back, darling. Listen, Stella. But the girl would not. Maddie came in and Stella fell into her arms weeping. John's mother immediately took up arms against him. The two women carried on in such an effective war against him for the next few days that finally Alfred was forced to take his son's part. Maddie, let that boy alone. I tell you, if he was home, buddy, he'd be drove by the way y'all. Hold on. Maddie, let that boy alone, I tell you. If he was a home buddy, he'd be drove away by the way y'all's racket. Well, Alf, that's all we po women can do. We wants our husbands and our sons. John's got a wife now, and he ain't got no business to be talking about going nowheres. I allowed that marrying Stella would settle him. Yes, that's all you women study about, settling some man. You takes all the get up out of 'em. Just let a fella make a motion like getting somewhere, and some woman'll be up to hollering, "Stop there, where's you going? Don't forget you belongs to me." My God, Alf, what you reckon Stella's gonna do? Let John walk off and leave her? No, get out of her foolishness and go along with him. He'd take her. Stella ain't got no call to go crazy 'cause John is. She ain't no woman to be flopping round from place to place like some of these reps following a section of gang. The man turned abruptly from his wife and stood in the kitchen door. A blue haze hung over the river, and Alfred's attention seemed fixed upon this. In reality, his thoughts were turned inward. He was thinking of the numerous occasions upon which he and his son had sat on the fallen log at the edge of the river and talked of John's proposed travels. He had encouraged his son, given him every advantage his own poor circumstances would permit. And now John was home-tied. The young man suddenly turned the corner of the house and approached his father. "Hello, Papa." "Hello, son. Where's Mama and Stella?" The old man merely jerked his thumb toward the interior of the house once more gazed pensively toward the river. John entered the kitchen and kissed his mother fondly. "Great news, Mama." "What now?" "Got a chance to join the Navy, Mama, and go all around the world. Ain't that grand?" "John, you surely ain't gonna leave me and Stella, is you?" "Yes, I think I am. I know how both of you feel, but I know how I feel also. You preach to me the gospel of self-sacrifice for the happiness of others, but you're unwilling to practice any of it yourself. Stella can stay here. I'm going to support her and spend all the time I can with her. I'm going. That's settled. But I want to go with your goodwill. I want to do something worthy of a strong man. I've done nothing so far but look to you and Papa for everything. Let me strive and think. In short, be a man." "No, John, I'll never give my consent. I knows you hard-headed just like your pa, but if you leave this place over my head, I never want you to come back here no more. If I was to be laid on the cooling board, I don't want you standing over me, young man. Don't even come to my grave, you ungrateful wretch." Mrs. Redding rose and flung out of the room. For once, she was too incensed to cry. John stood in his tracks, gone cold and numb at his mother's pronouncement. Alfred, too, was moved. Mrs. Redding banged the bedroom door violently and startled John slightly. Alfred took his son's arm, saying softly, "Come, son, let's go down to the river." At the water's edge, they halted for a short space before seating themselves on the log. The sun was setting in a purple cloud. Hundreds of mosquito hawks darted here and there, catching gnats and being themselves caught by the lightning-swift bull bats. John abstractly snapped in two the stalk of a slender young bamboo. Taking no note of what he was doing, he broke it into short lengths and tossed them singly into the stream. The old man watched him silently for a while, but finally he said, "Oh, yes, my boy. Some ships get tangled in the weeds." "Yes, Papa, they certainly do. I guess I'm beaten. Might as well surrender." "Never say die. You never can tell what'll happen." "What can happen? I have courage enough to make things happen, but what can I do against Mama? What man wants to go on a long journey with his mother's curses ringing in his ears? She doesn't understand. I'll wait another year, but I'm going because I must." Alfred threw an arm about his son's neck and drew him nearer, but quickly removed it. Both men instantly drew apart, ashamed for having been so demonstrative. The father looked off to the woodlot and asked with a reminiscent smile, "Son, do you remember showing me the tree that looked like a skeleton head?" "Yes, I do. It's there still. I look at it sometimes when things have become too painful for me at the house, and I run down here to cool off and think. And every time I look at it, Papa, it laughs at me like it had some grim joke up its sleeve." "You was always imagining things, John. things that nobody else ever thought on. You know, Papa, sometimes I reckon my longing to get away makes me feel this way. I feel that I'm just earth, soil lying helpless to move myself, but thinking. I seem to hear herds of big beasts like horses and cows thundering over me, and rains beating down and winds sweeping furiously over, all acting upon me, but me, well, just soil, feeling but not able to take part in it all. Then a soft wind like love passes over and warms me, and a summer rain comes down like understanding and softens me, and I push a blade of grass or a flower or maybe a pine tree. That's the ground thinking. Plants are ground thoughts because the soil can't move itself. Whenever I see little whirls of dust sailing down the road, I always step aside. Don't want to stop them because they on their shining way, moving. Oh, yes, I'm a dreamer. I have such wonderfully complete dreams, Papa. They never come true. But even as my dreams fade, I have others. Yeah, son, I have them same feelings exactly. But I can't find no words like you do. It seems like you and me see with the same eyes, hear with the same ears, and even feel the same inside. Only thing, you can talk it, and I can't. But anyhow, you speaks for me. So what's the difference? The men arose without more conversation. Possibly they feared to trust themselves to speech. As they walked leisurely toward the house, Alfred remarked the freshness of the breeze. It's about time the rain set in, added his son. The year's wearing on. After a gloomy supper, Pop John strolled out into the spacious front yard and seated himself beneath a chinaberry tree. The breeze had grown a trifle stronger since sunset and continued from the southeast. Maddie and Stella sat on the deep front porch, but Alfred joined under the tree. The family was divided into two armed camps, and the hostilities had reached that stage where no quarter could be asked or given. About 9 o'clock, an automobile came flying down the dusty white road and halted at the gate. A white man slammed the gate and hurried up the walk toward the house, but stopped abruptly before the men beneath the chinaberry. It was Mr. Hill, the builder of the new bridge that was to span the river. Howdy, John. Howdy, Alf. I'm mighty glad I found you. I'm in trouble. Well, now, Mr. Hill, answered Alfred slowly but pleasantly, we's glad you found us, too. What trouble could you be having now? It's the bridge. The Weather Bureau says that the rains will be upon me in 48 hours. If it catches the bridge as it is now, I'm afraid all my work of the past 5 months will be swept away, to say nothing of $250,000 worth of labor and material. I've got all my men at work now, and I thought I'd get as many extra hands as I could to help out tonight and tomorrow. We can make our weather tight in that time if I can get about 20 more. I'll go, Mr. Hill, said John with a great deal of energy. I don't want Papa out on that bridge. Too dangerous. Good for you, John, cried the white man. Now, if I had a few more men of your brawn and brain, I could build an entirely new bridge in 48 hours. Come on and jump into the car. I'm taking the men on down as I find them. Wait a minute. I must put on my blue jeans. I won't be long. John arose and strode to the house. He knew that his mother and wife had overheard everything, but he paused for a moment to speak to them. Mama, I'm going to work all night on the bridge. There was no answer. He turned to his wife. Stella, don't be lonesome. I'll be home at daybreak. His wife was as silent as his mother. John stood for a moment on the steps, then resolutely strode past the women and into the house. A few minutes later, he emerged, clad in his blue overalls and brogans. This time, he said nothing to the silent figures rocking back and forth on the porch. But when he was a few feet from the front steps, he called back, Bye, Mama. Bye, Stella, and hurried down the walk where his father sat. So long, Papa. I'll be home around 7. Alfred roused himself and stood. Placing both hands upon his son's broad shoulders, he said softly, Be careful, son. Don't fall or nothing. I will, Papa. Don't you get into a quarrel on my account.
John hurried on the waiting car and was whirled away. Alfred sat for a long time beneath the tree where his son had left him and smoked on. The women went indoors. On the night breeze were borne numerous scents of jasmine of roses, of damp earth of the river, of a pine forest nearby. A solitary whippoorwill sent forth his plaintive call from the nearby shrubbery. A giant owl roared and boomed from the woodlot. The calf confined in the barn would bleat and be answered by his mother's sympathetic moo from the pen. Away down in the Lake Howell Creek, the Basco Profundo of the alligators boomed and died, boomed and died. Around 10 o'clock, the breeze freshened, growing stiffer until midnight, when it became a gale. Alfred fastened the doors and bolted the wooden shutters at the windows. The three persons sat about a round table in the kitchen, upon which stood a bulky kerosene lamp, flickering and sputtering in the wind that came in through the numerous cracks in the walls. The wind rushed down the chimney, blowing puffs of ashes about the room. It banged the cooking utensils on the walls. The drinking gourd hanging outside by the door played a weird tattoo, hollow and unearthly, against the thin wooden wall. The man and the women sat silently. Even if there had been no storm, they would not have talked. They could not go to bed because the women were afraid to retire during a storm, and the man wished to stay awake and think with his son. Thus they sat, the women hot with resentment toward the man and terrified by the storm. The man hardly mindful of the tempest, but eating his heart out in pity for his boy. Time wore heavily on. And now a new element of terror was added. A screech owl alighted on the roof and shivered his doleful cry. Possibly he had been blown out of his nest by the wind. Maddie started up at the sound, but fell back in her chair, pale and trembling. "My God," she gasped. "That's a sure sign of death." Stella hurriedly thrust her hand in the salt jar and threw some into the chimney of the lamp. The color of the flame changed from yellow to blue-green, but this burning of salt did not have the desired effect, to drive away the bird from the roof. Maddie slipped out of her blue calico wrapper and turned it wrong side out before replacing it. Even Alfred turned one sock. "Alf," said Maddie, "what you reckon's gonna happen from this?" "How do I know, Maddie?" "I wish John hadn't away for here tonight." Mm. Outside, the tempest raged. The palms rattled dryly and the giant pipes groaned and sighed in the grip of the wind. Flying leaves and pine mast filled the air. Now and then, a brilliant flash of lightning disclosed a bird being blown here and there with the wind. The prodigious roar of the thunder seemed to rock the earth. Black clouds hung so low that the tops of the pines were among them, moving slowly before the wind made the darkness awful. The screech owl continued its tremulous cry. After 3 o'clock, the wind ceased and the rain commenced. Huge drops clattered down upon the shingle roof like buckshot and ran from the eaves in torrents. It entered the house through the cracks in the walls and under the doors. It was a deluge in volume and force, but subsided before morning. The sun came up brightly on the havoc of the wind and rain, calling forth millions of feathered creatures. The white sand everywhere was full of tiny cups dug out by the force of the falling raindrops. The rims of little depressions crunched noisily underfoot. At daybreak, Mr. Redding set out for the bridge. He was uneasy. On arriving, he found that the river had risen 12 feet during the cloudburst and was still rising. The slow St. John was swollen far beyond its banks and rushing on to sea like a mountain stream, sweeping away houses, great blocks of earth, cattle, trees, in short, anything that came within its grasp. Even the steel framework of the new bridge was gone. The siren of the fiber factory was tied down for an hour and a half, announcing the disaster to the countryside. When Alfred arrived, therefore, he found nearly all of the men of the district there. The river, red and swollen, was full of floating debris. Huge trees were swept along as relentlessly as chicken coops and fence rails. Some steel piles were all that was left of the bridge. Alfred went down to a group of men who were fishing members of the ill-fated construction gang out of the water. Many were able to swim ashore unassisted. Wagons backed up and were hurriedly driven away, loaded with wet, shivering men. 2 men had been killed outright, others seriously wounded. 3 men had drowned. At last, all men had been accounted for except John Redding. His father ran here and there, asking for him or calling him. No one knew where he was. No one remembered seeing him since daybreak. Dozens of women had arrived at the scene of the disaster by this time. Maddie and Stella, wrapped in woolen shawls, were among them. They rushed to Alfred in alarm and asked where was John. "I don't know," answered Alfred impatiently. "That's what I'm trying to find out now." "Do you reckon he's run away?" asked Stella thoughtlessly. Maddie bristled instantly. "No," she answered sturdily. "He ain't no sneak." The father turned to Fred Mims, one of the survivors, and asked him where John was and how the bridge had been destroyed. "You see," said Mims, "when that terrible wind came up, we was out about the middle of the river. Some of us was on the bridge, some on the derrick. The wind blowed so hard we could scarcely stand, and Mr. Hill told us to sit down for a spell. He afraid some of us might go overboard. Then all of a sudden the lights went out. Guess the wires was blowed down. We was all scared to move for slipping overboard. Then that rain commenced. I never seen it pour down like that since the flood. We sat there and someone begins to pray. Lord, how we did pray to be spared. Then somebody raised a song and we sung. You hear me? We sung from the bottom of our hearts till daybreak. When the first light come, we couldn't see nothing but fog everywhere. You couldn't tell which was water and which was land. But when the sun come up, the fog began to lift and we could see the water. That fog was so thick and heavy that the fog was so thick and heavy that it was hugging the river like a winding sheet. And when it rose, we saw the river had rose its way up during the rain. My God, Alf, it was running high, so high nearly touched upon the span of the bridge, and red as blood. So much clay, from the land that she done overflowed. Coming downstream as fast and pressed train was 3 big pine trees, and the first one wasn't 40 feet from us, and there was no chance to do nothing but pray. The first one struck us and shook the whole works, and before it could stop shaking, the other 2 hit us, and down we went. I thought I'd never see home again. But Mims, where's John? I ain't seen him, Alf, since the log struck us. Maybe he swum ashore. Maybe they picked him up. What's that floating way out there in the water? Alfred shaded his eyes with his gnarled brown hand and gazed out into the stream. Sure enough, there was a man floating on a piece of timber. He lay prone upon his back. His arms were outstretched, and the water washed over his brogans, but his feet were lifted out of the water whenever the timber was buoyed up by the stream. His blue overalls were nearly torn from his body. A heavy piece of steel or timber had struck him in falling, for his left side was laid open by the thrust. A great jagged hole wherein the double fists of a man might be thrust could be plainly seen from the shore. The man was John Redding. Everyone seemed to see him at once. Stella fell to the wet earth in a faint. Maddie clung to her husband's arm, weeping hysterically. Alfred stood very erect, with his wife clinging tearfully to him, but he said nothing. A single tear hung on his lashes for a time, then trickled slowly down his wrinkled brown cheek. "Alf! Alf!" screamed Maddie. "There's our son! I knowed when I heard that owl last night." "I see him, Maddie," returned her husband softly. "Why'd you stand in here? Go get my boy." The men were manning a boat to rescue the remains of John Redding when Alfred spoke again. "My poor boy. His dreams never come true." "Alf," complained Maddie, "why don't you hurry and get my boy? Don't you see he's floating on off?" Her husband paid her no attention but addressed himself to the rescue party. "You all stop.
Leave my boy gone. Don't stop him. Don't bring him back for that old tree to grin at. Leave him gone. He wants to go. I'm happy because this morning my boy is going to sea. He going to sea. Out on the bosom of the river, bobbing up and down as if waving goodbye, piloting his little craft on the shimmering river road, John Redding floated away toward Jacksonville, the sea, the wide world, at last. And thus endeth the story. You have just heard John Redding Goes to Sea, and this was the first published work of Ms. Zora Neale Hurston. This was the first story of hers ever published, and so I thought it would be a particular treat to read it tonight. I am excited to read some of your comments. I'm going to take a quick respite because my responsibilities and duties as a caregiver call. So we're just going to put this on pause for just a moment, and I'll be back shortly. Thanks for your patience. And we are back. Going over to the comments section for a minute so that I can see what you all had to say about this story. And let me go ahead and make sure that you can see me too. Here I'm is. All right, y'all. So let's go to the comments real quick. Let's see. First of all, good to see that Terry Meredith was able to join us. Good to see you too, April Wright. Let's see. Okay, so I see that some of you all, it looks like most of you were all for John going and maybe not having a lot of patience for Maddie and for her particular brand of dramatics as it was, as it were. I was particularly moved and touched by the bond that the two men shared, and I really loved and thought it was beautifully written the way that they shared that brief tenderness, and then because of the times and because of the nature and the script of Black masculinity, you know, particularly in that time that they pulled away from one another, even somewhat ashamed, though the bond between them was so obvious and so real. I have to say, as a man, you know, having grown up as a man child, um, I was envious of the love that Alfred clearly had for John. I think for me, what felt particularly interesting and telling was that Alfred had this love of his son who was clearly very different, a very creative thinking, artsy kind of guy during a time when that was probably not very often celebrated or thought much of. And I recognize that time changes language and that we use words differently. But I was struck by even then, I know that queer was used as an indicator on occasion of one's sexual identity. And I was struck by the way that that read. Um, how there was so much put on his being different, and then the idea of him marrying was such a surprise and such a shock and so unexpected because in fact he was so different. And I wonder how much of that was intentional, if a little bit subversive on the part of Miss Hurston. But it was an absolutely an intriguing way of handling and adding layers and depth to that relationship. But just seeing this unusual young man, a man who was different than what the script of masculinity
called for at the time for whatever reasons. Um, to be so embraced and so beloved by his father was something that spoke to me, as a first time reader of this story. But let's see. Let's go into some of I see so much commentary and I love to see it. I love to see it. Makes me really excited. April Rice says Daddy was talking sense. I feel like that's a t-shirt. I want that now on a shirt. But yeah, I think Alfred was talking a lot of sense. I did love though, despite his disbelief in conjure and magic, the wonderful little additions that that Ms. Hurston added, not just in the with the throwing the salt on the fire and turning the house coat inside out, and even Alf turning one sock inside out. Um, Also, I noticed some of the stuff growing outside, and then I know that, for some of the kitchen witches in my life and those who practice gardening as more of a spiritual thing than a reason to grow herbs for cooking, that some of the stuff that was growing out near the house, I was like, "Okay, so Maddie's for real about this." Like, she planted stuff with intention. Those were not just things that were just growing there. Siobhan Brown Robinson says she wildin'. I think at a certain point, Maddie might have been wildin'. Um, However, when you get to the end of the story, was she? She was fixed in her belief, and she believed that there was a conjure, a curse, a haint, a root put on her son that was going to lead to his undoing, that was going to take him away from her forever. Now, of course, one could argue that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that because of the difficulty that she put on him about it, that it pushed him even further. Even Alfred said that with the way y'all carrying on, he would run off anyway. I'm just circling through some of the comments here, putting some of them up on the screen. Poor John, indeed. It is a heartbreaking story, and yet the description of him lying there and bobbing as if waving goodbye. I mean, she puts so much poetry in it, but I got to tell y'all, there was one segment that just did me in. It was a nice long segment of description of smells, and where was it? I really wanted to come back to it because it just wow. It was so beautiful. And it's the crazy thing about reading Zora Neale Hurston's work is no matter how much of her work you read, she's always got just something truly beautiful and surprising that she pulls out. And you're in this very sort of simple setting sometimes, this really, plain folk conversation, and then she just dips her pen in gold and writes this beautiful script of the surroundings, and you can't help but to be moved by it. I don't want to spend too much time searching for it. I did want to read over it again because it was just so powerfully written. Um, the part where he talks about being soil and that trees and plants are the ground thinking. What? I was no more good. I was no more good. So I can imagine, yeah, you said somebody's cutting onions. If there's some tears happening over on that side, I can get it. I was feeling them too. I was absolutely feeling them too. Terry Meredith, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Angel Monique. I certainly appreciate it. Siobhan says, I'm not crying, you're crying. Look, it's all right. We can all cry a little bit, right? Like the homie told the ninja, it's okay for you to cry. For those of you all who missed, let me go ahead and do this little bit of housekeeping too. For those of you all who missed Tuesday's reading, on Tuesday we celebrated Eric Jerome Dickey by reading one of his short pieces. It was actually an excerpt, and that story will be up until next Tuesday. We're going to be taking it down after that, and then it will be available still on YouTube and I think on Twitch. But if you tend to watch here on Facebook, you have till next Tuesday to catch that. Also, in that read, we covered an original story by Walter Mosley. Not gonna lie, it wasn't really one of my favorites, but it was a good read. And I did do one of my own original stories. So make sure that you catch that before next Tuesday before we pull it away. Um, Kamisha Umstead said, whew, and yeah, I'm right there with the whew. Also, let's see, I want to go back through. I see another comment here. Um, Homie Lou says, I've never read or heard that story, and I knew what the ending would be when John mentioned that tree. Yeah, I don't think that the death was necessarily a surprise. It was certainly foreshadowed. Someone who was that bound and determined to leave had to leave one way or another. And as the events started to conspire toward him to be put in any situation where there might be peril, and then when peril did in fact visit, it's impossible to take away that he wouldn't have been hurt or killed. Um, when John says of the tree that it's like it's always got some trick up its sleeve. Um, what I love though, again, Alfred as a father, he listened to his son. He listened to his son. He didn't just brush off those ideas um as some sort of, poppycock bullshit. He listened and he heard him so that when he commanded to the rescue team to let his son go, he specifically calls out that tree and he says, "What?" And have that tree laughing at him like he wasn't going to do that. He wasn't going to let his son suffer that indignity. And that's beautiful to really be seen and to be heard like that, such that someone can speak to the hopes of your heart and preserve those even in your passing is a remarkable gift. Joker says that the intimacy between father and son is beautiful. I love their conversation, the honesty and the heart in it. Latricia says, I'm speechless, simultaneously sad and glad for John's release. I feel much the same. I definitely feel that. Wow, there's so many more comments here. Let me see what else we can have. What other ones? Terry says that I was in that storm. I could feel the anxiety. Me too. Me too. The silence that she establishes, and to be in that kind of situation, and to be somewhat alone because you're at odds with the people that you're with. I think really made it powerful. Um, I really like the description of the swollen river with the clay staining the water. Yeah, yeah, that was a really, it was vivid and it was dark and it spoke specifically to the death that was happening. Um, Tauntaun reminds me that it was the part before the storm. Yes, I will revisit that in the after story with you all. Not anxious, I'm eager. I'm excited to go into the second story of the night. We're going to be reading The Gilded Six Bits. Now, this story, much like the one that we just read, because it is the stock and trade of Miss Zora Neale Hurston to, as I say, write with her blessed pen the tongues of the folk in that region. And on occasion, because both of these are in the tradition of this show, they are cold reads. So while I skimmed through just to make sure that I wasn't visiting anything too difficult on our family tonight, I still have not actually read them. So there will be times when the passages catch me up a little bit. Um, I beg your indulgence and your patience. We did not run the disclaimer tonight because we dived right into the show. But I do remind you, as always, these are cold reads. The stories will be read as they are written without any editing or censorship. Um, also, we are going to deal with a lot of topics here. Everything is from a Black perspective. And when we are reading Black literature, that means reading Black pain. That is, while it's not always the case, it is par for the course. And so should you come upon something that triggers you, that hurts you, that is difficult for you, and you need to pull away, back out, or log off for a while, please do that. Place your self care above all. I understand. Check in with somebody, ask if it gets any better, find out, at what point you can cue back in. But by all means, do what you need to do to care for you. Um, One last comment here before we go into the next one. Angel Monique says that passage where the gentleman explained what happened out there was hypnotic. We sang until the sun came up. Yeah, I if I had read that section in advance, I would have worked harder to give that character a slightly different voice. Um, his description was a set piece of its own. Honestly, as a performer, as an actor, I kind of want to pull that and use that for a monologue for auditions next season, because there was a lot of strength in that. All right, let me take a little sip of water, give my mouth and throat a little bit of refreshment because I'm a bit parched. I really hate doing this on camera, so I'm just going boop, 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 and we're back. I like having my little background so that I can so that I can have a little bit. It's like pulling down a little privacy curtain. Thank you all so much. Your participation in the comments means everything to me. Just being able to see what you think and feel about these writings, it helps me as the host and as a performer to it keeps me engaged, knowing that you're engaged. Also, you should know that at the end of this, we're going to put up links within this thread. Matter of fact, we can go ahead and put up the link now. You can find John Redding Goes to Sea online and read it for yourself. And so we're going to put up the link where you can find that. And then when we complete this story, The Gilded Six Bits, we'll also put up a link for you to find that one as well. We've also got a recommendation for a book that you can purchase. Again, we always like to support local and Black bookstores. We tend to center on or favor our friends over at Harriet's bookstore, but any local Black bookstore that you can find, we recommend that you pick up a copy of these books yourself there. Our next story for tonight is going to be The Gilded Six Bits. This is another story, of course, by Zora Neale Hurston. I'm really, really excited to be celebrating her birthday in this way. Like, this is uh, Zora Neale Hurston is among my favorite authors, and this is a real treat for me. And I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. The Gilded Six Bits. It was a Negro yard around a Negro house in a Negro settlement that looked to the payroll of the G&G Fertilizer Works for its support. But there was something happy about the place. The front yard was parted in the middle by a sidewalk from gate to doorstep, a sidewalk edged on either side by quart bottles driven neck down into the ground on a slant. A mess of homey flowers planted without a plan but blooming cheerily from their helter-skelter places. The fence and house were whitewashed, the porch and steps scrubbed white. The front door stood open to the sunshine so that the floor of the front room could finish drying after its weekly scouring. It was Saturday. Everything cleaned from the front gate to the privy house. Yard raked so that the strokes of the rake would make a pattern. Fresh newspaper cut in a fancy edge on the kitchen shelves. Missy May was bathing herself in the galvanized washtub in the bedroom. Her dark brown skin glistened under the soap suds that skittered down from her wash rag. Her stiff young breast thrust forward aggressively, like broad-based cones with the tips lacquered in black. She heard men's voices in the distance and glanced at the dollar clock on the dresser. Hmm, I'm way behind time today. Joe gonna be here before I get my clothes on if I don't make haste. She grabbed the clean meal sack in hand and dried herself hurriedly and began to dress. But before she could tie her slippers, there came the ring of a singing metal on wood. 9 times. Missy May grinned with delight. She had not seen the big tall man come stealing in the gate and creep up the walk, grinning happily at the joyful mischief he was about to commit. But she knew that it was her husband throwing silver dollars in the door for her to pick up and pile beside her plate at dinner. It was this way every Saturday afternoon. The $9 hurled into the open door, he scurried to a hiding place behind the Cape jasmine bush and waited. Missy May promptly appeared at the door in mock alarm. "Who that chunking money in my doorway?" she demanded. No answer from the yard. She leaped off the porch and began to search the shrubbery.
She peeped under the porch and hung over the gate to look up and down the road. While she did this, the man behind the jasmine darted to the chinaberry tree. She spied him and gave chase. Nobody ain't gonna be chunking monkey at me and I don't do nothing, she shouted in mock anger. He ran around the house with Missy May at his heels. She overtook him at the kitchen door. He ran inside but could not close it after him before she crowded in and locked him with a rough and tumble. For several minutes, the two were a furious mass of male and female energy, shouting, laughing, twisting, turning, tussling, tickling each other in the ribs. Missy May clutching onto Joe and Joe trying, but not too hard, to get away. Missy May, take your hand out of my pocket, Joe shouted between laughs. I ain't Joe. Not less'n you gonna give me whatever it is you got in your pocket. Turn it go, Joe. I'll tell you close. Go on, tear him. You the one that pushes needles around here. Move your hand, Missy May. Let me get that paper sack out your pocket. I bet it's candy kisses. Taint. Move your hand. Woman ain't got no business in man's clothes nohow. Go away. Missy May gouged way down and gave an upward jerk and triumphed. I got it. 'Tis so, candy kisses. I knowed you had something for me in your clothes. Now I got to see what's in every pocket you got. Joe smiled indulgently and let his wife go through all his pockets and take out the things that he had hidden for her to find. She bore off the chewing gum, the cake of sweet soap, the pocket handkerchief, as if she had wrestled them from him, as if they had not been bought for the sake of this friendly battle. Whew! That play fight done got me all warmed up, Joe exclaimed. Give me some water. You got some water in the kettle? Your water is on the fire and your clean things is across the bed. Hurry up and wash yourself and get changed so we can eat. I'm hungry. As Mrs. said this, she bore the steaming kettle into the bedroom. You ain't hungry, sugar, Joe contradicted her. You's just a little empty. I'm the one was hungry. I could eat up camp meeting, back off associating, and drink Jordan dry. Have it on the table when I get out the tub. Don't you mess with my business, man. You get in your clothes. I'm a real wife, not no dressing breath. I might not look like one, but if you burn me, you won't get a thing but wife ashes. Joe splashed in the bedroom, and Missy May fanned around in the kitchen. A fresh red and white checked cloth on the table. Big pitcher of buttermilk beaded with pale drops of butter from the churn. Hot fried mullet, crackling bread, ham hock atop a mound of string beans and new potatoes. And perched on the windowsill, a pone of spicy potato pudding. Very little talk during the meal, but that little consisted of banter that pretended to deny affection when in reality it flaunted it. Like when Missy May reached for a second helping of the tater pone, Joe snatched it out of her reach. After Missy May had made 2 or 3 unsuccessful grabs at the pan, she begged, "Oh, Joe, give me some more of that tater pone." "Nope. Sweetening's for us men folk. Y'all pretty little frail eels don't need nothing like this. You too sweet already." "Please, Joe." No. I don't want you to get no sweeter than what you is already. We going down the road a little piece tonight, so you put on your Sunday go to meeting things. Missy May looked at her husband to see if he was playing some prank. Sure enough, Joe. Yeah, we going to the ice cream parlor. Where the ice cream parlor at, Joe? A new man done come down here from Chicago, and he got a place and took and opened it up for an ice cream parlor. And being as it's real swell, I want you to be the first ladies to walk in there and have some sit down. Do Jesus. I ain't know nothing about it. Who the man done it? Mr. Otis D. Slemons of Spots and Places, Memphis, Chicago, Jacksonville, Philadelphia, and so on. That heavyset man with the mouth full of gold teeth? Yeah. Where'd you see him at? I went down to the store to get a box of lye and seen him standing on the corner talking to some of the men's, and I come back and went to scrubbing the floor, and he passed and tipped his hat whilst I was scouring the steps. I thought I'd never seen him before. Joe smiled pleasantly. Yeah, he's up to date. He got the finest clothes I ever seen on a colored man's back. Oh, he don't look no better in his clothes than you do in yourn. He got a puzzle gut on him, and he's so chuckle-headed he got a poem behind his neck. Joe looked down at his abdomen and said wistfully, Wished I had a build on me like he got. He ain't puzzle-gutted, honey. He just got a corporation. That make him look like a rich white man. All rich men's got some belly on them. I seen pictures of Henry Ford, and he's a spare-built man. And Rockefeller look like he ain't got but one gut. But Ford and Rockefeller and this Slemons and all the rest can be as many gutted as they please. I satisfied with you just like you is, baby. God took pattern after pine tree and built you noble. You's a pretty man. And if I knowed any way to make you more pretty, I'd still take and do it. Joe reached over gently and toyed with Missy May's ear. You just say that 'cause you love me. But I know I can't hold no light to no Otis D. Slemons. And I ain't never been nowhere, and I ain't got nothing but you. Missy May got on his lap and kissed him, and he kissed back in kind. Then he went on. All the women's crazy about him everywhere he go. How you know that, Joe? He told us himself. That don't make it so. His mouth is cut crossways, ain't it? Well, he can lie just like anybody else. Good Lord, Missy. You women sure is hard to sense into things. He got a $5 gold piece for a stick pin, and he got a $10 gold piece on his watch, and his mouth is just crammed full of gold teeth. Sure wished it was mine. And what make it so cool, he got money accumulated, and women's give it all to him. I don't see what the women see on him. I wouldn't give him a wink if the sheriff was after him. Well, he told us how the white women's in Chicago give him all that gold money, so he don't allow nobody to touch it all, not even put their finger on it. They told him not to. You can make moderation at it, but don't touch him. Why ain't he stay up there where they so crazy about him? I reckon they done made him vast rich and he wants to travel some. He says they wouldn't leave him like a hit of work. They wouldn't leave him. He says they wouldn't leave him hit a lick of work. He got more lady people crazy about him than he could shake a stick at. Joe, I hates to see you so dumb. That stray nigga just tells y'all anything and y'all believe it. Go ahead now, honey, and put your clothes on. He talking about his pretty women's. I wants him to see mine. Missy May went off to dress, and Joe spent the time trying to make his stomach punch out like Slemmon's middle. He tried the rolling swagger of the stranger, but found that his tall bone and muscle stride fitted ill with it. He just had some time to drop back into a seat before Missy May came in, dressed to go. On the way home that night, Joe was exultant. Didn't I say old Otis was swell? Can't he talk Chicago talk? Wasn't that funny what he said when that great big old fat Ida Armstrong come in? He asked me, who is that fat broad with the fork shake? That's a new word. Us always thought 40 was a set of figures, but he showed us where it mean a whole heap of things. Sometimes he don't say 40, he just say 38 and 2, and that mean the same thing. Know what he told when I was playing for our ice cream? He said, I'd have to hand it to you, Joe. That wife of yours is just 38 and 2. Yes, sir, she's a Ford. Ain't he killing? He'll do in case of a rush. But he sure got a heap of gold on him. That's the first time I ever seen gold money. It looked good on him, sure enough, but it look a whole heap better on you. Who, me? Missy May, you's crazy. Where would a poor man like me get gold money from? Missy May was silent for a minute. Then she said, us might find something going along the road sometime. Us could. Who would be losing gold money around here? We ain't never seen these white folk wearing no gold money on their watch chain. You must be figuring Mr. Packard or Mr. Cadillac gonna pass through here. You don't know what been lost around here. Maybe somebody way back in memorial times lost their gold money and went on off, and it ain't never been found. And then if we was to find it, you could wear some without having no gang of women's like the Slimming say he got. Joe laughed and hugged her. Don't be so wishful about me. I'm satisfied the way I is. So long as I be your husband, I don't care about nothing else. I'd rather to all the women's in the world be dead than for you to have a toothache. Let's we go to bed and get our night rest. It was Saturday night once more before Joe could parade his wife in Slimmon's ice cream parlor again. He worked the night shift, and Saturday was his only night off. Every other evening around 6 o'clock he left home, and dying dawn saw him hustling home around the lake, where the challenging sun flung a flaming sword from east to west across the trembling water. That was the best part of life, going home to Missy May, their whitewashed house, the mock battle on Saturday, The dinner and ice cream parlor afterwards, church on Sunday nights when Missy outdressed any woman in town. Everything was all right. One night around 11, the acid ran out at G&G. The foreman knocked off the crew and let the steam die down. As Joe rounded the lake on his way home, a lean moon rode the lake in a silver boat. If anybody had asked Joe about the moon on the lake, he wouldn't have paid it any attention, but he saw it with his feelings. It made him yearn painfully for Missy. Creation obsessed him. He thought about children. They had been married more than a year now. They had money put away. They ought to be making little feet for shoes. A little boy child would be about right. He saw a dim light in the bedroom and decided to come in through the kitchen door. He could wash the fertilizer dust off himself before presenting himself to Missy May. It would be nice for her not to know that he was there until he slipped into his place in bed and hugged her back. She always liked that. He eased the kitchen door open slowly and silently, but when he went to set his dinner bucket on the table, he bumped into a pile of dishes and something crashed to the floor. He heard his wife gasp in fright and hurried to reassure her. "It's me, honey. Don't get scared." There was a quick, large movement in the bedroom. A rustle, a thud, a stealthy silence. The light went out. What? Robbers? Murderers? Some varmint attacking his helpless wife, perhaps? He struck a match, threw himself on guard, and stepped over the door sill into the bedroom. The great belt on the wheel of time slipped, and eternity stood still. By the matchlight, he could see the man's legs fighting with his breeches in frantic desire to get them on. He had both the chance and time to kill the intruder in this helpless condition, half in and half out of his pants, but he was too weak to take action. The shapeless enemies of humanity that live in the hours of time had waylaid Joe. He was assaulted in his weakness, like Samson awakening after his haircut. So he just opened his mouth and laughed. The match went out and he struck another and lit the lamp. A howling wind raced across his heart, but underneath its fury he heard his wife sobbing and Slemons pleading for his life, offering to buy it with all that he had. "Please, sir, don't kill me. $62 at the store. Gold money." Joe just stood. Slemons looked at the window, but it was screened. Joe stood out like a rough-backed mountain between him and the door, barring him from escape, from sunrise, from life. He considered a surprise attack upon the big clown that stood there laughing like a cheesy cat, like a chessy cat. But before his fist could travel an inch, Joe's own rushed out to crush him like a battering ram. Then Joe stood over him. "Get into your damn rags, Slemons, and that quick." Slemons scrambled to his feet and into his vest and coat. As he grabbed his hat, Joe's fury overrode his intentions, and he grabbed at Slemons with his left hand and struck at him with his right. The right landed. The left grazed the front of his vest. Slemons was knocked a somersault into the kitchen and fled through the open door. Joe found himself alone with Missy May, with the gold watch charm clutched in his left fist. A short bit of broken chain dangled between his fingers. Missy May was sobbing, wails of weeping without words. Joe stood, and after a while he found out that he had something in his hand. And then he stood and felt, without thinking and without seeing with his natural eyes. Missy May kept on crying, and Joe kept on feeling so much, and not knowing what to do with all his feelings. He put Slemons' watch charm in his pants pocket and took a good laugh and went to bed. "Missy May, what you crying for?" "'Cause I love you so hard, and I know you don't love me no more." Joe sank his face onto the pillow for a spell. Then he said huskily, "You don't know the feelings of that yet, Missy May." "Oh, Joe, honey, he said he was going to give me that gold money and just kept on after me." Joe was very still and silent for a long time. Then he said, "Well, don't cry no more. Missy May, I got your gold piece for you." The hours went past on their rusty ankles. Joe still and quiet on one bed rail, and Missy May wrung dry of sobs on the other. Finally, the sun's tide
crept up the shore of night and drowned all its hours. Missy May, with her face stiff and streaked towards the window, saw the dawn come into her yard. It was day, nothing more. Joe wouldn't be coming home as usual. No need to fling open the front door and sweep off the porch, making it nice for Joe. Never no more breakfast to cook, no more washing and starching of Joe's jumper jackets and pants. No more nothing, so why get up? With this strange man in her bed, she felt embarrassed to get up and dress. She decided to wait till he had dressed and gone. Then she would get up, dress quickly, and be gone, forever beyond the reach of Joe's looks and laughs. But he never moved. Red light turned to yellow, then white. From beyond the no man's land between them came a voice, a strange voice that yesterday had been Joe's. Missy May, ain't you gonna fix me no breakfast? She sprang out of bed. Yeah, Joe. I didn't reckon you was hungry. No need to die today. Joe needed her for a few more minutes anyhow. Soon there was a roaring fire in the cook stove, water bucket filled full, and 2 chickens killed. Joe loved fried chicken and rice. She didn't deserve a thing, and good Joe was letting her cook him some breakfast. She rushed hot biscuits to the table as Joe took his seat. He ate with his eyes in his plate. No laughter, no banter. Missy May, you ain't eating your breakfast. I don't choose none, I thank you. His coffee cup was empty. She sprang to refill it. When she turned from the stove and bent to set the cup beside Joe's plate, she saw the yellow coin on the table between them. She slumped into her seat and wept into her arms. Presently, Joe said calmly, Missy May, you cry too much. Don't look back like Lot's wife and turn to salt. The sun, the hero of every day, the impersonal old man that beams as brightly on death as on birth, came up every morning and raced across the blue dome and dipped into the sea of fire every morning. Water ran downhill and birds nested. Missy knew why she didn't leave Joe. She couldn't. She loved him too much. But she couldn't understand why Joe didn't leave her. He was polite, even kind at times, but aloof. There were no more Saturday romps, no ringing silver dollars to stack beside her plate, no pockets to rifle. In fact, the yellow coin in his trousers was like a monster hiding in the cave of his pockets to destroy her. So often, she often wondered if he still had it, but nothing could have induced her to ask, nor yet to explore his pockets to see for herself. Its shadow was in the house, whether or no. One night, Joe came home around midnight and complained of pains in the back. He asked Missy to rub him down with liniment. It had been 3 months since Missy had touched his body, and it all seemed strange. But she rubbed him, grateful for the chance. Before morning, youth triumphed and Missy exulted. But the next day, as she joyfully made up their bed, beneath her pillow, she found the piece of money with the bit of chain attached. Alone to herself, she looked at the thing with loathing, but look she must. She took it into her hands with trembling and saw first thing that it was no gold piece. It was a gilded $50. Then she knew why Slimmons had forbidden anyone to touch his gold. He trusted village eyes at a distance not to recognize his stick pin as a gilded quarter and his watch charm as a 4-bit piece. She was glad at first that Joe had left it there. Perhaps he was through with her punishment. They were man and wife again. Then another thought came clawing at her. He had come home to buy from her, as if she were any woman in the longhouse, 50 cents for her love, as if to say that he could pay as well as Slimmons. She slid the coin into his Sunday pants pocket and dressed herself and left his house. Halfway between her house and the quarter, she met her husband's mother, and after a short talk, she turned and went back home. Never would she admit defeat to that woman who prayed for it nightly. If she had not the substance of marriage, she had the outside show.
She saw no more of the coin for some time, though she knew that Joe could not help finding it in his pocket. But his health kept poor, and he came home at least every 10 days to be rubbed. The sun swept around the horizon, trailing its robes of weeks and days. One morning, as Joe came in from work, he found Missy May chopping wood. Without a word, he took the axe and chopped a huge pile before he stopped. "You ain't got no business chopping wood, and you know it." "How come? I've been chopping it for the longest." "I ain't blind. You making your feet for shoes." "Won't you be glad to have a little baby child, Joe?" "You know that without asking me." "It's going to be a boy child, and the very spit of you." "You reckon, Missy May?" "Who else could it look like?" Joe said nothing, but he thrust his hand deep in his pocket and fingered something there. It was almost 6 months later. Missy May took to bed, and Joe went and got his mother to come wait on the house. Missy May was delivered of a fine boy. Her travail was over when Joe came in from work one morning. His mother and the old woman were drinking great bowls of coffee around the fire in the kitchen. The minute Joe came into the room, his mother called him aside. "How did Missy May make out?" he asked quickly. "Who, that gal? She strong as a ox. She gonna have plenty more. We done fixed her with the sugar and lard for the sweetener for the next one." Joe stood silent a while. "You ain't asked about the baby, Joe. You ought to be mighty proud, 'cause he sure is the spitting image of your son. That's yourn, all right. If you ever get another one, that'n is yourn. And you know I'm mighty proud too, son, 'cause I never thought well of you marrying Missy May, 'cause her ma used to fan her foot around smart, and I've been mighty scared that Missy May was gonna misput her on, and I've been mighty scared that Missy May was going to misput her on her road." Joe said nothing. He fooled around the house till late in the day. Then, just before he went to work, he went and stood at the foot of the bed and asked his wife how she felt. He did this every day during the week. On Saturday, he went to Orlando to make his market. It had been a long time since he had done that. Meat and lard, meal and flour, soap and starch, cans of corn and tomatoes, all the staples. He fooled around town for a while and bought bananas and apples. Way after a while, he went around to the candy store. "Hello, Joe," clerk greeted him. "Ain't seen you in a long time." "Nope, I ain't been here. Been around in spots and places. Want some of those molasses kisses you always buy?" "Yes, sir." He threw the gilded $50 on the counter. "Will that spend?" "What is it, Joe?" "Well, I'll be doggone. A gold-plated 4-bit piece. Where'd you get it, Joe?" "Off in a stray nigga that came through Eatonville. He had it on his watch chain for a charm going around making this gold money. He had a quarter on his tie pin, was all golded up too, trying to fool people, making out he's so rich and everything. Trying to toll off folks' wives from home." "How'd you get it, Joe? Did he fool you too?" "Who, me? Nah, sir. He ain't fooled me none. Know what I done? He come around me with smart talk, and I hauled off and knocked him down and took his old 4 bits away from him. Gonna buy my wife some good old lasses kisses with it. Give me 50 cents worth of them candy kisses." 50 cents buys a mighty lot of candy kisses, Joe. Why don't you split it up and take some chocolate bars too? They eat good too." "Yes, sir, they do. But I wants all that in kisses. I got a little boy child home now. Tain't a week old yet, but he can suck a sugar tit and maybe eat one of them kisses himself." Joe got his candy and left the store. The clerk turned to the next customer. "Wished I could be like these darkies, laughing all the time. Nothing worries them." Back in Eatonville, Joe reached his front door. There was the ring of singing metal on wood. 15 times. Missy May couldn't run to the door, but she crept there as quickly as she could. "Joe Banks, I hear you chunking money in my doorway. You wait till I got my strength back, and I'm going to fix you good for that." And thus endeth the story.
So, all right, all right, all right. I saw some of the comments coming out of the corner of my eye, and you'll notice I actually faced away from the screen at a certain point because I didn't want to see the comments as they were rolling up. Because I knew it. Man, I knew when he got off work early. I'm like, oh man, Slim is gonna be in there with his wife. Like you know. And then I started to see. I saw somebody say, "Who was it? Who was I saw Mimi Brown's no. Mimi Brown hit us with the no. And I was like, I can't. Let me turn around. Let me turn around. But let's go back and let's see. So I know we've posted the link here. Let's go ahead and hit this one. So you can find, for those of you who are on Facebook watching us, you can find John Redding Goes to Sea at that link there, and you can read that and enjoy it yourself. And then the story that I just read, Gilded Six Bits, is available in the collection Spunk, Three Tales by Zora Neale Hurston. And you can find both, you can find that at Harriet's Bookshop where you can purchase it. Now, that was not actually my Morgan Freeman. I admit it got Morgan-esque at times, but that was not my Morgan Freeman. Um, but at the beginning of the story, yeah, they such a cute couple? Like we were rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. Because I was straight up like I wanted good things to happen for them. I know that we're past time. That story ran a little bit longer than I intended. So right now it's about 11:22. I do want to address some of the comments. We're not going to get a chance for a simple story tonight, but I think that's okay. I think these stories, even though they dealt with some heavy topics, were overall light enough. And it was good to see that even though it took him some time, Joe came back to himself and ultimately remembered that he loved his wife and that he would love his son and embrace his son as his son. There was a little bit of concern there. There was a moment there, but yeah, at the beginning of the story, they were so cute. Like you wanted good things for them, and it was almost like oh my gosh, I love these two. Yes, like you have to love them, and it's almost like this is too good to last. Like, and I think that's one of the tragedies of so much of our storytelling and so many of the narratives that we have, whether they're true to life, I can't say, but we so rarely get the chance to see black love be just black love, just black love that has, hard times and difficulties due to circumstance, but where people love each other and stay with each other and don't break that bond and don't break that union and don't have it torn from them, but they just get to love and it's almost too much to hope for. So while I was reading and I was right there with you, I was in love with them too. Mimi Brown said I love them, like I was in love with them too. But I was like, that other shoe's going it's gonna drop, right? Because that's what happens. That's what happens in our stories. A puzzle gutted. Yeah. Um, somebody gonna have to hit me to that. Yo, when she said, I hate to see you so dumb. And I was thinking the same thing. I was like, bro, niggas lie, right? Like he might have just been lying. Like that just because he said it don't make it true. But let's talk a little bit about Slemons. I think it's obvious that once you realize that the gold was a facade, everything was likely a facade. Um, but isn't it interesting how we can get so turned around? She had a weekly steady supply of silver coins that she knew was coming from a man who she knew would faithfully chunk those 9 silver coins into her home and on his person carry nothing but gifts and presents for her. But the prospect of the gold that she couldn't even really see, gold that she wasn't even allowed to touch, took her away from the regular delivery of the silver coins that she had coming through her door every week. There were some absolute There were some absolute beautiful lines in the story Kamisha said, and I would love it if you all went ahead and I'm gonna ask one of our moderators to post the link to this story so that you can find it and share it with us on the page. Come back to this reading and share some of the lines that you liked. Because yeah, there were some beautiful lines in both of these stories, and I'm gonna try and pull some of them so that we can have some quotes and some remembrances of this. Um, Ultimately, yeah, we see forgiveness and grace, which is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful game. Puzzle gutted is having the itis. Is that what it is? Okay, like you ate, feeling like you ate too much. I still don't understand why. I don't know what that has to do with puzzles. And the way it was written here was P-U-Z-Z, like it was spelled like puzzle, like P-U-Z-Z-L-E. So yeah. Latricia says redemption. Yeah, there was grace, there was forgiveness, there was redemption. There were some beautiful themes here. Overall, despite the fact that we did have to endure the sadness and the tragedy of the betrayal, beautiful story. And that love story at the beginning of it, like, man, I want to write couples that cute, but I feel like you have to have a certain blessing on your hand and your pen to be able to make that feel so real and so live. But anyhow, y'all, this has been our celebration of the birthday of Miss Zora Neale Hurston, part of the Harlem Renaissance, and whose writing has informed the styles of Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, and so many others. We are grateful for her contributions to literature, to Black literature, to American literature, for the honesty that she gave in the voices of the typically unheard. And I think that even still, her work challenges us to not to tell the truth of the beauty of the common tongue. She does it so beautifully. Like I'm not as fond of the term code switching as I had been in past years, but there's something that happens as you read these sort of beautifully crafted long strings, like these daisy chains of sentences where she's strung together these beautiful descriptions, and then we get the very simple tongue of the people talking like people talk. And those worlds, they don't coexist. They are the same. They are the same. Um, because our language and our tongue is a beautiful thing. And it is what brings the color and the description and the texture and the vibrance to the world around us. Uh, her pen, her writing is a testimony to that. That these kinds of beautiful, deep, rich descriptions live in the mouths of those who are too often unheard. But we can change that. You can change that. You've got a story to tell. No matter how it sounds when you say it out loud, you've got a story to tell. And if you write it and you send it to me, I might read it. I would love to. So please send your submissions to storytimewithjulian@gmail.com. Um, if you've got anything that you want to share or a story that you want to tell, I want to help people hear it. All right. Anyway, y'all, this has been Storytime with Julian. We are going to have a brief after story. So, for those of you all who are in the after story, you can go ahead and we'll open up a room there. And that's it. This has been Storytime with Julian. I have been Julian. Thank you so much for coming out. Do me one solid, please. If you loved tonight's story, if you enjoyed these readings, tell somebody and then tell somebody else. Storytime with Julian can only grow if you help it grow. There's only so many folks that I can meet. The algorithm will only let me do so much. But if you tell your friends, if you invite your friends, if you tag somebody and they see it, then they'll come and then they can be a part. And then you can remind them next week, hey, you remember that thing? You got to swing by and check it out again. I love when you guys come and check it out later, but I really, really love having you here live. It means so much. And if you want to help us to continue to grow and to be able to develop more programs and to be able to add more to the mix, you can contribute if you are so inclined to. You can contribute to Cash App. Storytime Julian is where you can find us on Cash App. And I know I keep on telling you I'm going to open up the Patreon, but I just haven't done it yet because I really want to have some special things for you guys when I do open up the Patreon. But stay tuned for that. Anyway, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and call this a night. Going to put up one more tag here. This is where you can follow and share all of our pages. This is all the information that you need to find us. Send your friends to us. Screenshot this if you have to, so that you can write it down later. And that's it, y'all. It's been a wonderful Thursday. I'll see you next week at 10 o'clock on Tuesday for another story time with Julian. Gonna go ahead and roll those credits now any second. So I bid you have a wonderful night and peace.